This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Well, I got to tell you, we got a tough one coming up on Saturday night. I'm not sure we should even send the team. Maybe we should just send the band. I guess somehow we'll muddle through and be Penn State's sacrificial lamb, right? Michigan Podcast is next.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deeper in the front. Waits for it. It's caught. This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison. Brady gets terrific. Throws it and a touchdown. Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him. And a leaping interception by Woodson. Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good. He's 5'7", 179 pounds. A junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris hacks a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler. And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Second. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic. Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, welcome to this week's Michigan Podcast. I am Steve Deace. Yes, we're going to have a full preview of the huge primetime whiteout clash against the mighty, unstoppable, unbeatable, invulnerable Penn State Nittany Lions. And yeah, I mean, like you, I'm expecting a bloodletting. I'm not sure Michigan's even going to play the game. I don't think we have much of a chance, but covering Michigan's kind of what we do here, so we're going to have a full-fledged preview of Penn State later on in this week's episode, but I got to warn you, these highlights should come with a parental advisory notification. They're pretty demoralizing. You're going to think this is the 76 Steelers, 85 Bears, Alabama Crimson Tide when you watch this, as I did as well. Hey, we love to know what you think about what we think. Follow us on Twitter at Michigan Podcast. Also, thank you to everybody supporting us on Patreon. You know, this week I had somebody say to me, hey, you guys need to produce 2 podcasts a week. I just can't get enough of this, and we appreciate that. But, you know, before I ask our on-crack staff to produce a whole other episode of this each week, because a lot goes into producing one episode, before I ask them to do another one, we kind of have to pay for this one, all right? So, hey, if you'd like to see another episode of Michigan Podcast, or if you just like this current one we do each week, support us on our Patreon page. We give you access to my college football point spread picks, which were 11-7 against the spread. That's pretty good. Last week, also so far, I'm 4-2 against the spread, picking Michigan games. You get access to those, as well as our exclusive instant reaction podcast we do immediately after the conclusion of every Michigan football game if you support us on our Patreon page. Also want to thank all of you subscribing to us here on YouTube and on iTunes and on Stitcher as well. If you like us, share the link. Also, share a positive review. And finally, our friends at Detroit Sports Podcast who help us to get the word out about this episode of Michigan Podcast each and every week. Well, before we get to crying in our beer about playing those incredible, terrific, undaunted Penn State Nittany Lions, let's look back over Michigan's win against the Indiana Hoosiers. And what a crazy series this has been. Check out this tweet from Drew Hallett over at Maize and Brew, going back over the recent history of Michigan, Indiana. 2009, you had the Donovan Warren interception game. Tate Forcier throws a late touchdown pass to win it. 2010, Denard Robinson scores here on this very play in the final seconds to beat the Hoosiers. That's when he was that year's September Heisman winner. How about 2013? There were 113 points scored in this game. In regulation, defense tackling optional for both teams. 2015, Harbaugh's first season, we went down there, unleashed Jake Rudock in an aerial assault passing attack. He throws for over 400 yards. One of the most prolific days for a Michigan quarterback ever. Michigan gets the stop and the win in double overtime. Last year, remember the Winter Wonderland game? One of the largest snow events at Michigan in decades was last year's game. That was the final home game for a group of seniors that put the program back on the map under the direction of Jim Harbaugh. And then there was this year's game, which went into overtime as well, but frankly should not have. When you have a defense like we have, and you have a 10-point lead with 4 minutes and change to go, you should not be in overtime. But something I say a lot in my man cave as I watch the Wolverines this year, young teams, man. Young teams. I mean, it's just, you can see Harbaugh's frustration, too. He lets it out a little bit. He gets beyond the canned answers, and he lets his frustration out a little bit when he was asked about Michigan setting a record for most penalties on Saturdays. Like, it's like my own kids at home. Every time I tell them not to spill the milk, I turn around, somebody is spilling the milk. But it just happens with young teams. 16 penalties, a lot of them on defense, a lot of them dumb, like Kakoa Crawford, for reasons only Allah knows, deciding to jack an Indiana guy on the sidelines for a 15-yard personal foul. In fact, he did it twice, which took us out of plus territory field position on a drive we eventually had to punt on on it went. We made this game harder on ourselves than we had to, but I think we found something. At least I'm hoping we did. An identity on offense. And you saw it this past week against the Hoosiers. Michigan just decided enough. Why go out and recruit these big, stronger, faster guys if we're not going to use them? So we're going hat on a hat, power running game, ISO running game, and it worked. Karan Higdon with a 200-yard rushing event, 3 touchdowns. He had all of Michigan's scores, including an incredible run in overtime that he essentially did on his own, which ended up winning the game. And he had another long run. Now, we still had the issue. This is the 5th time in the Harbaugh era we've had the ball at the end of a game, unable to run the clock out. And we gave him the ball back, and Indiana got the field goal to force overtime. But I'm hoping we found an identity, especially because a lot of that power running between the tackles. And then when the defense stacks the box, then you saw the cutback lanes for the big runs. So it was a big win for Michigan in terms of confidence coming off the game against Michigan State, against a team that's been very pesky. Yes, Michigan has not lost to the Hoosiers since 1987, but as we showed you just a few minutes ago, a lot of these games have had really quirky endings. They've gone down to the wire. Michigan found a way to get it done. Maurice Hurst with the field goal block that essentially ended up being the game-winning play, because if Indiana gets those points, we don't even go to overtime. They win this thing in regulation, and the Michigan season looks a lot different today than it does without that Maurice Hurst field goal block and then the interception in overtime to close Indiana down once they had gotten as close as the 3-yard line. And the Wolverines survive another crazy game against the Hoosiers, keep their Big Ten title hopes alive. But of course, now you got Penn State. I think we all know this is a great football team. I mean, this might go down as one of the greatest teams in college football history. They're unbeatable. They're unstoppable. I mean, Michigan's defense has never seen an offense like this before. I mean, Saquon Barkley just dominates everybody. So again, I'm not even sure why we're going to play this game. I mean, I've watched all the pundits. I've listened to all the analysis. It's pretty clear we're toast. I mean, I guess we'll show up as scheduled Saturday night, because it's kind of a league rule and all to show up for your games when they're scheduled, and the TV partners like it when you're there. So I guess we'll just take our 4-quarter beating, bloodletting, I guess we'll just see how it all turns out. But before we look ahead to Penn State, a look back at the win against the Hoosiers.
Redshirt freshman takes the handoff. He gets to the edge. Kareem Walker has a first down. Karan Higdon has the first down and more. Inside the 20-yard line. but from 40 here, Nordin is good. Michigan takes the early lead. And it's blocked. Maurice Hurst got the block. And they'll do just that, run it with Higdon. Close to the first down. And this one is going to be good as well. Michigan 6, Indiana nothing. Here comes a blitz off the edge. Under pressure, not seeing it or feeling it is Peyton Ramsey. 3rd and 7. O'Corn under pressure, avoids a sack, extends the play, flips it down the sideline, and drops it in. Donovan Peoples-Jones, and they score a touchdown. Higdon bounces it outside, heading for the pylon, heading for the end zone. That's a Michigan touchdown. The starting quarterback on 3rd down at IU. Over the middle, broken up. Intended for Tibia. Tyree Kennel, though, knocked it away. Under pressure with the blitz coming. And nowhere to go for Peyton Ramsey. Maurice Hurst and Rashawn Gary. Ron Higdon. That's a pretty good start. No mystery here. 2 tight ends and Higdon has the first down. Replaced now by Evans. Evans finds a lane. He's got a first down. 4th quarter, 1st and 10. And a handoff to Higdon. Hey! Parks up the middle. There goes Karan Higdon. Touchdown. 59 yards. Swing pass. One-handed catch. How about that from Jay-Sean Harris? Still didn't go anywhere. He lost 4 yards. Taking a shot down the sideline. That might be intercepted. Levert Hill picks it off. He jumped right in front of Taysir Mack, the redshirt freshman. Ramsey steps up, flips it left. It's caught, diving for the pylon. What failure! He's in for the Indiana touchdown. Formation, but now there is the onside kick. And it is touched along the sideline. Did Simmie Cobb stay in bounds? I think he did.
After review, the Indiana player did not complete the catch in bounds. First down at the 48-yard line.
Peyton Ramsey over the middle. Gets it away clean. He's got it inside the right upright. They'll start on the ground. He runs into his own man. Bounces it outside. Look at Higdon. What a day. Touchdown to start overtime. And they will. And Michigan is ready for it. Ellison with nowhere to go. Now it's 2nd down and goal. A rollout for Ramsey. At the pylon wide of Jay-Sean Harris. There's the zone read. Right up the middle goes Peyton Ramsey for nothing. So now it comes down to this. A rollout for Ramsey. Has to get it in the end zone. It's a jump ball. And it's intercepted by Tyree Kennel. And that'll do it.
How'd you like to have that in your backyard? Yeah, wouldn't we all? Sport Court of Michigan, if that's you, if you're like, make it happen, Sport Court of Michigan has you covered. From basketball to tennis to batting cages to hoops. If you need anything athletic, even something with a Sparty logo on it, you want it in your backyard, give them a call. Based out of Michigan, ready to install your court sooner than you would expect. Now, if you're in the southeast Michigan area or in Ann Arbor, Tim Barnes will personally walk you through the process of having your dreams of a professional court in your backyard if you visit sportcourtmi.com. sportcourtmi.com. If you're outside of southeast Michigan, you need a hoop for your driveway or yard, he's got you covered anywhere in the country, shipped right to your door at monsterhoops.com. monsterhoops.com, anywhere in the country. Now, if you mention the Michigan podcast to monsterhoops.com, you're going to save $100 on a Monster Hoop. Even better news, if you mention Michigan podcast to sportcourtmi.com, you could save up to $1,000 on your backyard game court. Mention Michigan podcast, monsterhoops.com, sportcourtmi.com, and tell them Michigan podcast sent you. Back here on Michigan Podcast, this would normally be the time we'd have an expert guest on this week's episode, but given the gravity of this situation, I thought I just should handle this myself. I mean, when you are facing an opponent as overwhelming, as dominant, as unbeatable as Penn State, there's really no reason to bring, somebody on here and just tell us what we already know. I mean, Michigan doesn't really have much of a chance, guys. We're double-digit underdog, and we may not score. I think we could get shut out in this game, don't you? I mean, listen, don't just take my word for it. Check out some of these highlights. Watch what we're up against on Saturday night. See for yourself what Michigan faces against Penn State. I mean, look at some of this. This is insane. And I decided, though, just for fun, I decided to do some homework while you're watching these. Because I'm like, well, who are these teams he's doing this stuff against? I went and looked at the strength of schedule ratings according to Sagarin. I saw Michigan's strength of schedule is 33. That's pretty good, playing a top 40 strength of schedule. It's one of the toughest schedules in the Big Ten, actually, so far. And then I looked at Penn State's strength of schedule. 51. Wow. Like fourth from the bottom in the league. I mean, but still, look at these highlights. I mean, just listen. These guys are unbeatable, so I'm not trying to get anybody's hopes up here. I think we all know Michigan's toast here. I think we all recognize that. I think we all recognize there's really no point in even playing this game, but I decided just for the heck of it, let me look up a little bit more information. Let me see what else is out there because, I'm kind of a glutton for punishment, and I'm sure the facts are going to bear out that there's no point in even playing this game this weekend, right? So I went and looked it up, and here's what else I found. Michigan's defensive statistics so far this season. Nationally, Michigan's number one in total defense, number one in pass efficiency defense, number one in 3-and-outs, 6th in rushing defense, 8th in scoring defense, 18th in tackles for loss. And also against a much tougher schedule than Penn State's played so far. But again, the eye test, right? That statistics are for losers. The eye test, it kind of speaks for itself. There's no point in getting all worked up when you look at the highlights of an Ubermensch that we're watching right here, a completely unstoppable force who's also an immovable object. What's the point, right? Yeah, you're right. But just in case, since we're going to play the game anyway, we're going to play it anyway, another fact. Just something else I found. Despite Saquon Barkley's heroics, Penn State is just 66th nationally in rushing offense. Michigan, by the way, with allegedly the worst offensive line in the history of intercollegiate football, is 49th in rushing against a stronger schedule. But I'm sure it doesn't mean anything, right? Look at this. Can you see Devin Bush tackling this? I can't. Maurice Hurst, he's got to grasp for air. Rashawn Gary, he's going to be chest grabbing middle of second quarter here. But again, just for some balance to the analysis, I found one more piece of information. Michigan is an abysmal 109th nationally in tackles for loss allowed. That's fire your offensive line coach bad. However, Penn State's celebrated offense is worse. They're worse than that. Even with this you've been watching for the last few minutes, they are 121st in the nation out of 130 teams in tackles for loss allowed. So, those are some facts. I wouldn't put too much stock in facts, data doesn't matter. Pundit analysis does. That's all that matters, right? Not much of a real chance here for the Michigan Wolverines. Not up against this. How could you ever expect to stop that? Especially with the little ragamuffins we throw out there on defense. Our guys just athletically just aren't good enough. In fact, I think I'll conclude my Penn State analysis with some of the greatest Michigan pregame analysis of all time. Beano Cook back in 1997, before we played Penn State at a whiteout on Judgment Day. He said, hey, Michigan shouldn't even bother showing up and just bring the band. Final score was Michigan 34, Penn State 8, but there's that. So, but again, we'll muddle through somehow. Hopefully we at least end up getting a field goal out of this game and just don't completely trip over our own maize and blue phalluses for 3.5 hours in primetime. We approach the midway point of the season. Of course, Big Ten play is just getting underway, but we're halfway through the season in total. Here's how I would assess the teams 1 through 14 in the Big Ten as we speak. Illinois, bad look, Lovey, losing at home to Rutgers, who's good news for them, off the schneid in the Big Ten. Nebraska plummets to 12th after a second straight humiliating primetime loss at home. Put that in perspective, the last 2 night games Nebraska has lost at home. Prior to the last 2 weeks when they were literally depanted by Wisconsin and Ohio State, 2008, and before that, you got to go back to Billy Joe Hobart when number 1 Washington won at Lincoln back in 1991. They don't lose home night games very often until now. They lose them now, and in humiliating fashion. Ohio State, guys, Ohio State hasn't punted against Nebraska in 5 years. True story, bro. 2012, okay? 2012, guys, was the last time Ohio State punted against Nebraska. Yikes. Continuing on in our Big Ten power ratings, Minnesota score was much closer than the game. Michigan State physically dominated them, and Minnesota got a couple of garbage time touchdowns. Maryland looks like they're finally feeling the brunt of the quarterback injuries. Those are finally settling in. Northwestern may have saved its season with that win in College Park on Saturday. Indiana, I think they have something with this new quarterback who I think will have some confidence in the way he led his team back against a terrific defense. I think they're going to win some games, maybe even starting this week in East Lansing. I think they're going to win some games down the stretch. Purdue physically showed up against Wisconsin, didn't get their doors blown off. They've got a real shot at bowl eligibility as well. Iowa's sitting there at number 6. Intriguing game between them and Northwestern this week. And then Michigan at number 5. Likely to drop, though, after getting probably housed, humiliated, and destroyed by Penn State because they're the greatest team ever, and we have no chance against them. Michigan State at number 4, only because they beat Michigan. Your top 3, I don't know. Wisconsin, I bought in. Finally, I've been saying all along, they haven't played anybody. I bought in, and, they beat Purdue ugly 17-9. So I don't know how good Wisconsin is. I think Ohio State by the end of the year will be the best team in the Big Ten. We have to play them too, so another, not sure what kind of shot we have. Penn State, best team of all time in my view. Remains number 1 in my Big Ten power ratings until somebody knocks them off, and that's not going to be this week. Not going to be this week because they're the hostess with the mostest. We have no shot in that game. I mean, what do we have? Maybe think 3-4 guys would even start for Penn State, maybe on the whole 2 deep. And I'm probably being kind, actually. So, I guess I'll watch, because I'm a loser Michigan fan with nothing else to do, but I'm a shut-in, but I'm not really expecting all that much. If I had a vote in the AP poll, this would be my top 25. I put Iowa there because they actually are one of the 12 teams in the country that has 3 wins or more against teams with winning records. South Carolina jumps back in the poll after firing Butch Jones. South Florida. West Virginia, nice comeback win against TCU. Central Florida, which is taking names against the 118th ranked schedule in the country. Auburn trying to get Gus Malzahn fired with that loss to LSU, who checks in at number 19. Washington drops. They played a team with a pulse, got beat. 2 of their best players out for the year. Huskies could be in trouble. Michigan at number 17, Virginia Tech at 16, Washington State -7 in turnovers. Who do you think you are, Michigan against Michigan State with that effort? Michigan State 14, Oklahoma State 13, Wisconsin at 12. They have played nobody at all. NC State at number 11. Next 2 games, they got a bye this week. Notre Dame and Clemson after that. So we're going to find out a lot about the Wolfpack then. My top 10, Miami, Ohio State in there, as well as USC, Notre Dame. Those 2 teams play this weekend, one of the biggest USC-Notre Dame games in a while. Is it the biggest since the Reggie Bush push game of 2005? Oklahoma at number 6. And then my top 5. I've got at number 5 in my poll, Clemson, although I thought about keeping them in the top 4 even with the loss to Syracuse because of their overall resume. But then I remembered Penn State's unbeatable. In fact, I've got them underranked at number 4. Penn State should be in a poll by itself, right? There should be, like we do with Alabama. Maybe we'll do that with Alabama. In fact, let's just skip the season. Let's have Alabama and Penn State play off right now. Because after Penn State gets done humiliating Michigan on Saturday night, everybody's going to understand they're the only team that has a chance at Alabama, but I guess we'll play the game anyway because contractually we're obligated to. TCU, with their resume, is number 3. I think Georgia's number 2. They look a lot like Alabama, in fact. And then the Crimson Tide there at number 1. If I had to turn in my Heisman ballot this week, and when you turn in your Heisman ballot, you get to turn in a top 3, I got Saquon Barkley. In fact, I was going to make him 1, 2, and 3. Especially after watching that video we showed earlier in the podcast. I mean, when you're watching, I don't know, a combination of Emmitt Smith, Barry Sanders, Jim Brown, Earl Campbell. Like if they all got together and had a kid, it would be Saquon Barkley, except he's even better than that, really. He's even better. Next 2 people on my Heisman list, Bryce Love, getting some love, still averaging 10 yards a carry at Stanford. That's nuts. Baker Mayfield, late game heroics leading Oklahoma back to keep their championship hopes alive in the Big 12 for the Oklahoma Sooners. We'll come back, wrap up this weekend's edition of Michigan Podcast, see if we can figure out some way possible that Michigan could even, forget winning the game, how about just being in the game against Penn State? I'll see if I can figure it out during this break. Yes, Steve, not much of a break there. You're right, because I thought, is there a way Michigan could beat Penn State? Spent 2 seconds. No. So we're back. This week's Twitter poll. What will be the outcome of Michigan-Penn State on Saturday night? 66% of you think it's going to be by a touchdown or more. 13% of you by a touchdown or less. Only 21% of you that follow us on Twitter believe Michigan will pull the upset. Now, my answer is not on the board because I've got Penn State winning this one 49-10. When I come up with that score, just kind of made it up off the top of my head. 49-10 sounded good, so I'm going to go with that score. This week's question of the week comes from Eric Wood. Based on everything we have seen from Michigan, how is it logically possible to say we win this game? Right now, I'm like Moses' brother Aaron when he came down from the mountain. And the people are like throwing all their gold into the fire to make a golden calf. And Moses goes up to his brother. He's like, dude, you had one job while I was gone. I had you one job. Just keep an eye on these guys while I was gone, getting these stone tablets. What's going on? And Moses and Aaron turns his pockets out. I don't know. Bupkis. I don't know how this happened. That's my answer to your question. I can't come up with any logical reasons. I mean, I had a couple potentially logical reasons looking at some of the actual strength of schedule numbers and some statistical data points, but those are like facts. We don't do facts and analysis and punditry. Eric, what the hell do you think this is? The media or something? So I have no logical reasons. That's why, I think we're getting housed. In fact, when Michigan gets back in Ann Arbor late Saturday night, they're going to change the name of the big house to Housed. That's what they're going to call it. We got no shot. Don't show up. Just bring the band. No point in even playing this one out. Hell, your quarterback's name is O'Corn, for goodness sakes. Okay? The other team's got some cool guy named Saquon. His name even looks like it ought to have an S on a chest, right? We had no shot. Like Syracuse beating Clemson, like that was going to happen, right? I mean, who the hell was predicting that? Who had Cal beating Washington State? Who had Auburn blowing a 20-0 first quarter lead? I mean, I saw some crazy old coots predicting 7 unranked teams were going to beat ranked teams in college football last week, right? Like something like that would ever happen. So There is no logical reason, Eric. In fact, Eric, I would advise you not even watch the game. Don't even watch. And finally, we're going to close it out this week with this, because again, I had no logical reasons for why Michigan could beat Penn State. I don't think it's possible. Bet your house. In fact, whatever the number is, put it on Penn State. Michigan has no chance. Wins against teams with winning records halfway through the season. These are the only teams in all of college football that have 3 wins or more against teams with winning records. Clemson's the only team with 4. Alabama, Iowa, Georgia, LSU, NC State, TCU, Sparty, USC, and Washington State each have 3. Now, conspicuously absent from that list, yes, is Michigan, but another team is absent from that list as well. Penn State. They have, in fact, no wins over teams that currently have winning records. But again, don't let a stat like that fool you. When you're as great and as unbeatable and as dominant as this team, who at this point last year was going to fire their coach, clearly is, don't let facts, don't let stats, don't let data get in the way of gripping and melting down when we all know it's Rake Your Lawn Saturday night. Don't even watch. It's going to be Name Your Score Saturday there at Happy Valley. So sadly, because of that, we'll be back here, I'm sure, chronicling a humiliating, debilitating loss for the Michigan Wolverines against Penn State, hoping against hope that somehow we can continue on. Even the season itself will muddle through, knowing that our program is essentially their doormat. We'll be back here nonetheless for all of the bloody details here on Michigan Podcast. Right about now, we could use a pick-me-up. So if you want to support us on Patreon, we would appreciate it. Follow us at Michigan Podcast on Twitter if you want to cry on your beer along with us. If you want to lament and vent when this bloodletting is over against Penn State, we'll be there for you. We'll have our instant reaction podcast as well. Probably 50-0, 49-10, maybe a score like that for Penn State, maybe something like that. So good luck watching on Saturday night. I wish I had better news for you, but after all, we're playing Penn State. What do you expect? Go Blue.